how we got to here in my own story was I spent a lot of years putting heroes on a platform as if I could be connected with them in the right circles, if I could get, that essay by C.S. Lewis, if I could get into the inner ring.
Right.
Then I'll have arrived, and then I'll be, I'll be saved.
Worthy of love.
I'll be worthy of love, yeah. And I had put a number of these heroes on pedestals while I was in seminary, and had become incredibly arrogant. And I won't go through that whole story right now, but I had eventually come to the place in ministry where I was simply burnt out and at the end of myself, and came to a place where I was really coming to understand my need for grace and just to live, understanding why I needed the gospel. And it was in that moment that where I had sort of been connected with some of my heroes, and none of it was satisfying. And then I was out of ministry, and I was sort of on my own and forgotten by a lot of people I had really valued, and realized that in trying to seek out celebrity and hero worship gets you nowhere, that I was going to start to listen to the people who said, I'm being mistreated and I'm suffering and no one's listening to our stories. And so as I was seeing news about black men killed by police officers 20 years ago, as a young conservative man, I would have found ways to just write that off. They probably did something wrong. There's something not on the video. I would never even watch the videos. And so I decided I'm going to start watching these videos. And as I did, I realized that this is inexcusable. This is awful. And I'm culpable because I haven't been listening to their voices. And then Me Too moved around. And I would have written that off and said, these are just women that are, all the lines, out to ruin some guy's life. They're out for revenge. They're out for money, which is the most laughable thing in the world to think that. And I thought, I'm going to listen to the stories of these women. And then Church 2 rolled around. And I thought, I definitely need to listen to the stories of these women. And I was also at a point where I had realized I had just consumed a certain segment of literature on manhood and womanhood without any discernment. I just took it as gospel truth and hadn't actually really been looking critically at what the Bible said about men and women. And so I had views about women and reactions to women that were not informed by the Word of God, were not informed by Jesus Christ. And so as I was listening to the stories of my sisters, what they were experiencing in the church, and simultaneously wanting to go back to the Bible and say, what's it actually say? I just determined, well, I'm out of any of these circles where I'll be admired by or appreciated by any of these heroes, and I'm not after that anymore. So I'm just going to start saying what I see and just being honest about it. And was doing that on Twitter. And I tweeted out a string of tweets about women who were the first people in the Bible, not just the first women, but the first people in the Bible to do certain things. Just as I was beginning to recognize the place women had in the storyline of redemption, which was previously just unrecognized by me. And the Gospel Coalition asked me to turn that into an article, and so I did. And then Elyse, who we didn't know each other, but I knew of her because she was this author who I admired. I'd read Give Them Grace, which gave me grace. And the women in our church were being transformed by her books. But of course, I hadn't really paid much attention to them because she was a woman, and I was still at that place where I didn't read books authored by women because I was a man, which is a problem. And she reached out to me and asked me to come on her family's podcast to talk about this article. And we read this. I read the article on the air, and Elyse said, "You should turn this into a book." And I said, "You should write this with me." And she said, "Well, let's talk off the air." And so I sent her an outline for a book I had in mind. I contacted her and she said, "Are you serious? Do you want to talk about this?" She said, "Well, let me know what you have in mind." So I sent her an outline, which is our table of contents for Worthy. And she graciously said, "Yeah, let's do this." And that's where the book came from at least how the Lord was working through me.